Ngozi has always been a hard-working woman with big dreams. She was born in a small village called Obododike. Growing up, she was always the clever one, quick with her hands and even quicker with her mind. Her parents struggled to send her to school, but by the time she finished secondary school, there was no money left for further education. So, Ngozi stayed back in the village and helped her mother sell akara by the roadside. Life wasn't easy, but Ngozi was determined to make something of herself. When Ngozi turned 23, that was when she met Peter. Peter came into her life. Peter was tall, charming, full of big ideas. Peter had come to Obododike to visit a cousin, and the moment he saw Ngozi, he was smitten. It didn't take long for him to win her heart with his sweet words and promises of a better future. Peter was from Lagos, a bustling city that sounded like dreamland to Ngozi. He told her stories about the big markets, the tall buildings, and the endless opportunities. Ngozi fell in love with not just Peter, but also the life he painted for her. After a short courtship, they got married in a small but joyous ceremony. Ngozi's parents were proud and everyone in the village wished her well as she left with Peter to start her new life in Lagos. But her younger sister Miriam felt sad. She was very close to her sister Ngozi, but now her sister was going to be living far away from her. Life in Lagos was not as easy as Ngozi had imagined. Peter worked as a driver for a logistics company and his salary was barely enough for the both of them. At first, Ngozi stayed at home trying to find her footing in the city and thinking about what she could possibly do to make money to assist her husband. After a few months, she started selling cooked food by the roadside near their apartments. Her food was good and customers kept coming back. Soon, she saved enough money to rent a small shop. Her business grew, and so did her dreams. But running the business was not easy. Ngozi would wake up before dawn to cook and wouldn't rest until late at night. She started thinking about bringing someone from the village to help her. That was when she remembered her younger sister Miriam. Miriam was only 20 and had just finished secondary school for a year now. Ngozi thought it would be a good idea to bring her to Lagos, give her a chance to learn the business, and maybe even send her to a vocational school. Ngozi spoke to Peter about it, and he agreed. It's a good idea, he said. Miriam can help you, and it will keep you from overworking yourself. Ngozi was happy. She called her parents, and they agreed to let Miriam come. A few weeks later, Miriam arrived in Lagos. Miriam was young and full of life. Miriam had a very cheerful personality and was eager to help Ngozi with the business. At first, everything seemed perfect. Miriam quickly learned the ropes, and Ngozi was grateful to have her around. Miriam's youthful energy brought more life to the business, and customers seemed to like her. But as time went on, Ngozi started noticing some changes. Peter, who used to complain about being tired after work, suddenly had more energy. He would stay up late, chatting with Miriam and laughing at her jokes. Ngozi brushed it off at first, thinking it was just harmless sibling-like bonding. After all, Miriam was her sister and Peter was her husband. What could go wrong? She shoved the thought off. Unknown to Ngozi, Peter and Miriam's relationship was becoming more than just friendly. It started with small, innocent moments, a lingering look here, and a laugh that lasted a little too long. Peter began complimenting Miriam in ways that made her blush, and soon the lines between right and wrong started to blur. Miriam, young and naive, found herself drawn to Peter's charm. He told her things she had never heard before, made her feel special in a way that left her confused yet exhilarated. Peter, on the other hand, was calculating. He saw in Miriam a way to escape the life he had with Ngozi, a life he had begun to find suffocating. Peter had always been ambitious, but he lacked the discipline and the work ethics to achieve his dreams. He resented how hard Ngozi worked and how much control she seemed to have over their finances. Miriam, with her youth and admiration for him, represented a fresh start, a chance to build a new life on his own terms. The secret affair deepened over time. Peter and Miriam would find excuses to spend time alone. When Ngozi was at the shop, they would sit at home, talking about their dreams and plans. Peter began planting ideas in Miriam's head, telling her she deserved more than helping Ngozi sell food. He painted a picture of a glamorous life they could have together, far away from the hustle and bustle of Lagos. Miriam was hesitant at first, torn between her loyalty to Ngozi, her sister, and her growing feelings for Peter. But Peter was persuasive. He told her that Ngozi didn't truly value her, that she was just using her for cheap labor. "You are too young and beautiful to waste your life like this," he would say, his voice dripping with sincerity. Slowly, Miriam began to believe him. Their affair even became bolder. Peter would sneak into Miriam's room at night, whispering sweet nothings and promises of a bright future. They started making plans to leave Lagos and start a new life together. Peter convinced Miriam that it was their own chance at happiness. Meanwhile, Ngozi remained unaware of what was happening under her roof. She was too busy with her business, working tirelessly to save for her dream restaurant for the family. She trusted Peter and Miriam completely, never suspecting that they were plotting against her. Ngozi would often talk about her plans with Peter, sharing her dreams of expanding the business and turning it into a mini restaurant and securing a better future for all of them. Peter would nod and smile all the while, knowing that he had no intention of staying. The turning point came when Peter discovered the exact amount Ngozi had saved in their joint account. He realized it was enough to set them up comfortably in another city. That night, he and Miriam sat together, finalizing their plan. They decided to leave the following weekend while Ngozi was at the market buying supplies for the business. Peter assured Miriam that everything would go smoothly. "By the time she realizes what happened, we will be long gone," he said confidently. Miriam felt a pang of guilt, but Peter quickly silenced her doubts. "Ngozi will be fine," he said. "She's strong. She will move on. She is very industrious. But we deserve to be happy, Miriam." Miriam nodded, convincing herself that he was right. As the days drew closer, Peter and Miriam's behavior became more erratic. Peter started coming home late, claiming he had extra work, while Miriam grew distant, avoiding eye contact with her sister Ngozi. Ngozi noticed the changes, but dismissed them as stress. She assumed Peter was tired from work and Miriam was homesick. She had no idea that they were counting down the days until they would live her life in ruins. On the morning of their planned escape, Ngozi woke up early as usual. She kissed Peter on the cheek before heading to the market, completely unaware that it would be the last time she would see him and Miriam under the same roof. As she walked away, Peter and Miriam began packing their bags, their hearts pounding with a mix of excitement and fear. Later that day, Ngozi returned home angry, wondering why her sister Miriam did not show up at the business place to assist with sales as she would always do. She was ready to question her and to call Miriam to order. But Ngozi returned home to an empty house. At first, she assumed they had gone out, but why would they go out with a lot of things from the house? She wondered, worried. But as the night wore on and there was no sign of them, panic set in. Miriam's phone was switched off, and Peter's line kept ringing without an answer. Ngozi's mind raced with fear. What if something terrible had happened to them? By the morning, Ngozi could no longer keep her worries to herself. She went to the nearest police station to report them missing. Tearfully, she explained that her younger sister and husband had both vanished without a trace. The officers listened sympathetically and assured her that they would begin an investigation immediately. Within hours, the police started looking into the matter. They visited neighbors and asked questions, piecing together the last known movement of Peter and Miriam. But the more they dug, the more things didn't add up. Some neighbors mentioned seeing Peter and Miriam leaving the house with luggage, but no one had thought much of it at the time. Ngozi clung to hope, refusing to believe that they could have left willingly. They must have been kidnapped, she told the officers. Why else would they take their things? Maybe the kidnappers made them pack so it would look like they left on their own will. The officers didn't dismiss her concerns, but privately, they began to suspect that something else was at play. They decided to check bank records and phone activities, hoping for clues. Ngozi, meanwhile, was consumed with worry. She couldn't eat, she couldn't sleep, constantly praying for their safe return. Her neighbors tried to console her, but nothing could ease her fears. Days turned into weeks, and still there was no word from Peter and Miriam. The police investigation continued, but Ngozi was left with the uncertainness of what had happened to her family. Little did she know the truth was far more devastating than she could have ever imagined. When the police assessed the couple's bank's record, the officer in charge called Ngozi in to update her. Madam, we found some irregularities in your accounts, he began gently. Ngozi leaned forward, her heart pounding. It seems your husband recently withdrew a substantial amount of money, your entire savings. Ngozi froze. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely audible. The officer hesitated before continuing. It looks like the withdrawal were made over the past few days, right before they disappeared. We've also tracked their phone location. They've been contacts traveling together, heading out of Lagos. Ngozi's words shattered. Her mind raced with disbelief, anger, and heartbreak. So, so, so they weren't kidnapped? She stammered. The officer shook his head. It appears they left willingly. I am sorry, ma'am. We're still investigating, but all evidences suggest they planned this. Ngozi left the station in shock. She couldn't believe that the two people she trusted the most had betrayed her completely. When she got home, the reality of her situation hit even harder. Her rent was due in a few weeks, and she barely had enough money to keep the food shop running. Her savings, which she had worked so hard to build, were gone. The life she had envisioned for herself seemed to crumble before her eyes. She sat in the empty apartment, staring at the walls that now felt like they were closing in on her. The betrayal cut deep, but beneath the pain, a fire burned. She knew she couldn't give up. Yet, as determined as she tried to be, the weight of her struggle soon became unbearable. Within a month, Ngozi's situation worsened. She was unable to pay her rent, and the landlord grew impatient. One morning, he arrived with a stern warning. Madam, if you can't pay by the end of this week, you will have to leave. I have been more than lenient. Ngozi pleaded for more time, but her words fell on deaf ears. By the end of the week, With no money to offer, she was forced out of the apartment. She gathered her belongings, just a few clothes and pots, and left, tears streaming down her face. Homeless and heartbroken, she wandered the streets, unsure of where to go. Her full business, once her pride and joy, had also taken a hit. Customer began complaining about the quality of the food. Ngozi, consumed by her thoughts and grief, could no longer focus on cooking. Her once delicious meal turned bland, and soon her customers stopped coming. Without income, she couldn't afford the shop rent either. The landlord gave her an eviction notice, and she was forced to shut down the business as she had worked so hard to build. With nowhere else to turn, Ngozi found herself sleeping in an uncompleted building on the outskirts of Lagos. The structure had no doors or windows, just cold cement walls that offered little protection from the elements. At night, she lay on tattered mats, listening to the distant sounds of the city she once dreamed of conquering. The mosquitoes were relentless, and the cold night air beat at her skin. But Ngozi had no choice. This was her new reality. Her days were spent wandering the streets, searching for menial jobs to earn enough money for food. Sometimes she managed to find work, washing clothes or carrying goods in the market, but the pay was meager, barely enough. Hunger became a constant companion, gnawing at her inside and sapping her strength. Ngozi's appearance began to change. Her once bright eyes grew dull, her cheeks hollowed, her clothes hung loosely on her tiny frame. People who knew her before barely recognized her. Some whispered in pity, others avoided her altogether. The vibrant, hopeful woman who had come to Lagos full of dreams was now a shadow of her former self. Despite everything, Ngozi refused to give up. She clung to the hope that one day she would rise again, but each day brought new challenges, and the weight of her struggle seemed to grow heavier. The betrayal of Peter and Miriam haunted her, a constant reminder of the life she had lost. Yet, deep down, she knew she had to keep moving forward, no matter how hard it got. The nights in the building was cold and terrifying. Strange sounds echoed through the empty walls, and Ngozi could never fully relax. Her mind constantly replayed events of the past months: the betrayal by Peter and Miriam, the loss of her savings, and the collapse of her once thriving business. It felt as if life was punishing her for something she couldn't even name. One fateful night, as Ngozi tried to drift into a restless sleep, on a thin mat she had salvaged, a shadow loomed over her. Before she could react, a man she didn't recognize grabbed her from behind. Her scream echoed into the empty night, but no one came to her aid. The assault was brutal. He left her broken, raping her physically, emotionally. When the man left, she coiled up into herself, trembling and crying until the dawn. For days after the event, Ngozi could barely move. Her body ached and her spirit felt shattered. She didn't report the incident to the police. She couldn't bear the thought of reliving in through questioning, or worse, being dismissed. She tried to block it out and focus on surviving, but the trauma lingered in her every thought, haunting her at every turn. Weeks later, Ngozi began feeling strange. She was always nauseous in the morning and often felt dizzy. At first, she dismissed it as stress and poor nutrition. But as the symptoms persisted, a nagging suspicion crept into her mind, gathering what little courage she had. She went to a local clinic where the doctor confirmed her fears. She was pregnant. The news hit Ngozi like a thunderbolt. She sat in the clinic, staring at the doctor in disbelief. Pregnant? She couldn't understand how her life, already in shambles, could become even more complicated. She was married to Peter for over a year, but she never for once missed her period or got pregnant. She prayed to be pregnant, but she never got pregnant. But now, she was pregnant for an unknown man that abused her. To make matter worse, she didn't have a home, a steady income, or even a shred of stability. And she was carrying the child of a man she didn't know, a man who had violated her in the worst way. Ngozi walked out of the clinic in shock, clutching the small slip of paper with her test results. She wandered the street aimlessly, tears streaming down her face. How would she survive this? How could she bring a child into a world where she herself was barely surviving? The pregnancy made everything harder. As her belly grew, so did the stares and whispers of those who saw her. People assumed she was just another irresponsible woman who had gotten herself into trouble and gotten pregnant. The judgment weighed heavily on her, but she lacked the strength to defend herself. She barely had the strength to go through each day. Ngozi's attempts to earn money was futile. She tried selling small items by the roadside, but her swollen feet and aching back made it difficult to stand for long. Hunger gnawed at her constantly, and she often went days without a proper meal. Her once bright eyes were now dull, and her cheeks sunken, and her frame frail. Despite everything, there were moments when Ngozi felt a flicker of hope. She would place her hand on her growing belly and wonder about the child inside her. Would it be a boy or a girl? Would they have her eyes or her smile? These thoughts gave her a small reason to keep going, even when the weight of her circumstances threatened to crush her. One rainy night, she lay coiled up in the corner of the uncompleted building. Water began to pour through the cracks on the wall and the open windows. The mat she slept on was soaked within minutes, and she had no choice but to stand in the corner, shivering as the cold rain drenched her. She clutched her belly, whispering prayers for the baby's safety. The next morning, Ngozi woke up with a fever. Her body was weak, and she could barely lift herself off the ground. She needed a medical attention, but she didn't have the money to pay for it. Desperate, she dragged herself to a local church she had passed by before. The church was small, with peeling paint and a rusted roof, but it was warm and filled with kind faces. When Ngozi stumbled into the church, the pastor's wife immediately noticed her condition. "My dear, what happened to you?" she asked, helping Ngozi into a chair. Ngozi broke down, telling the woman bits and pieces of her story. The pastor's wife listened intently, her eyes filling with tears. She called over some of other women in the church, and together they helped Ngozi to a small room at the back of the church where she could rest. For the first time in months, Ngozi felt a glimmer of kindness. The church women gave her food, clean clothes, and a warm place to sleep. They didn't ask for anything in return. Slowly, Ngozi began to regain some of her strength. She knew her journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel completely alone. However, the reality of her situation loomed over her like a dark cloud. She couldn't stay at the church forever, and the baby's arrival was drawing closer. And every night, she lay awake, her mind racing with fear and uncertainties. Would she be able to provide for the child? Would she ever find a way out of the endless circle of pain and hardship? Despite the overwhelming odds, Ngozi clung to a fragile thread of hope. She didn't know what the future held, but she vowed to keep fighting for herself and for the life growing inside her. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but she was determined to take it one step at a time. Still, Ngozi knew she couldn't rely on the church's goodwill indefinitely. One morning, before the church women began their daily activities, She snuck out of the premises with a few loaves of bread she had bought on credit. She decided to hawk bread on the streets, hoping to make small profits. The pastor's wife had strictly told her to rest, but Ngozi felt an urgency to earn money. She knew that once the baby arrived, she might be bedridden for days, unable to fend for herself. Walking through the bustling city with her swollen belly and a tray of bread balanced on her head, Ngozi called out to potential buyers. Fresh bread! Come and buy your fresh bread! Her voice was very weary, but determined. Some people pitied her and bought a loaf, while others turned away, uninterested. By midday, the sun bore down mercilessly, and Ngozi's feet ached from walking. Still, she pushed on. That afternoon, while walking through the crowded market, Ngozi felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. She stopped in her track, clenching her belly. The pain subsided after a few moments, but it left her breathless. She told herself it was nothing, just the strain of the day's walk. But as she tried to continue, the pain returned, this time more intense. Ngozi realized with growing panic that she was in labor. She tried to call for help, but the bustling market was too noisy. As she sank to her knees, a young man noticed her distress. Auntie, are you okay? He asked, rushing to her side. When Ngozi shook her head, clutching her belly, the man understood. You are in labor. Let me help you. The man flagged down a passing taxi and helped Ngozi into the back seat. She was in pain, tears streaming down her face as the contraction grew stronger. The man who introduced himself as Chike reassured her as the taxi sped towards the nearest hospital. Don't worry, you will be fine, he said, though his own voice trembled with worry. At the hospital, Ngozi was rushed into the maternity ward. Chike stayed behind, pacing anxiously in the waiting area. Hours later, a nurse emerged with a tired but relieved smile. She's fine, and so is the baby. A healthy baby boy, she said. Chike let out a sigh of relief and asked to see Ngozi. When he entered the room, Ngozi was holding her newborn son, her face a mixture of exhaustion and awe. She looked up at Chike, managed a weak smile. Thank you, she whispered. Chike nodded, sitting down beside her. You're welcome. I am just glad I could help. Chike didn't stop there. He paid Ngozi's hospital bills, refusing to let her protest. You have been through enough, he said gently. Ngozi couldn't hold back her tears. As Ngozi held her baby, she felt a flicker of hope. Though her struggles were far from over, but in that moment, she allowed herself to feel a small measure of joy. The road ahead was still uncertain, but now she wasn't entirely alone. She had a baby by her side. For weeks after leaving the hospital, Chike made frequent visits to check on Ngozi and her baby, whom she had named Emmanuel, a name that meant God with us. Chike brought food, diapers, clothes for the baby. He even paid off Ngozi's debts at the bakery she had borrowed bread from. Slowly but surely, he became a constant presence in her life. One afternoon, while visiting, Chike brought up a sensitive issue. Ngozi, he said, his tone careful. I have been thinking, this place, it's no place for you and Emmanuel. I live in Ibadan, and there is more space and opportunity there. I can help you start all over. Ngozi stared at him, unsure of what to say. Chike's kindness was undeniable, but the idea of uprooting her life again made her anxious. I don't know, Chike, she said hesitantly. This is my life now, and I am coping as you can see. I don't want to be a burden to you. But look around, Chike countered gently. This city hasn't been kind to you as you think. You deserve a fresh start, somewhere that you are not haunted by the past. After much thought, Ngozi agreed to visit Ibadan. Chike rented a modest apartment for her and Emmanuel and gave her money to settle in. He also arranged for her to start a culinary skills where she learnt catering professionally. For the first time in years, Ngozi felt a sense of stability. Months turned into a year, and during that time, Chike became even more involved in Ngozi's life. He adored Emmanuel and treated him as if he were his own son. His kindness and dedication began to chip away the walls Ngozi had built around her hearth. One evening, Chike took Ngozi out to a quiet dinner, and after hesitating for a moment, he said, Ngozi, I have watched you grow stronger each day. I know your past has hurt you deeply, but I hope you see that I am not here to hurt you. I want to build a life with you. Will you marry me? Ngozi's heart pounded in her chest. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately. Chike had shown nothing but love and respect, but the scars of her past made her cautious. Chike, I I don't know, she said. Honestly, what if all things fall apart again? Chike reached out for her hand. I can't promise life will always be easy, Ngozi, but I can promise to stand by you no matter what. Tears filled Ngozi's eyes as she nodded. Yes, Chike, I will marry you. Chike opened a restaurant for Ngozi in the city of Ibadan, and her business was doing just fine with her past experiences in the business and what she had learnt in the catering school. She was able to grow the business tremendously. Ngozi and Chike got married in a grand style. The months following their wedding were some of the happiest of Ngozi's life. She and Emmanuel moved into Chike's home, a luxurious and beautiful mansion with warm atmosphere. Chike was so humble that you could never tell that he was so rich. Chike's cook and gardener welcomed her warmly, except for Chike's cleaner, who had been on 2 weeks leave. For Ngozi, life finally seemed to be giving her a break, so she thought. One day, the cleaner who had been on leave returned. Chike introduced her to Ngozi. Hey, meet your new madam, my wife. From henceforth, you will be answerable to her. Is that clear? Chike said to her. Yes, Oga, she replied. When the cleaner turned round to greet his boss's wife, Ngozi's blood ran cold. Standing before her was Miriam, her younger sister. Miriam's face paled as she fell to her knees, sobbing. Sister, please forgive me. I am sorry. I have been punished for what I did to you. Peter is sick. He had a stroke. Life hasn't been what I thought it would be. I am sorry. Sister, please forgive me. Ngozi felt a mixture of anger, pain, and pity. Miriam's betrayal had caused her unimaginable suffering, but seeing her sister now, broken and pleading, stirred a strange mix of emotions. After a long silence, Ngozi said, Miriam, but why will you do that to me? What wrong did I ever do to you and Peter? Each day, I keep asking myself same question without an answer. But do you know what broke me even more? It is you! The thought of you, my sister, my own blood, betraying me without even looking back. And now you beg for forgiveness just like that? Anyway, I forgive you, but I can never have you in my life. You remind me of too much pain. Miriam wept as Ngozi walked away, leaving her to pack her things. She had just lost the only job she had been surviving on, as Peter had been down with stroke and couldn't even fend for himself. Chike held Ngozi close, offering silent support as she processed the encounter. It was painful moment, but Chike never knew that Miriam, his cleaner, was Ngozi's sister. What a small world. But for Ngozi, it marked a turning point. Ngozi realized she no longer carried the burden of anger or resentment. She was free to focus on the life she was building, a life filled with hope, love, and the promise of a bright future. Hmm. Thank you for listening to the story. I hope you've learned a lesson from it. Please share with us the valuable lessons you have learned in the comment section. Subscribe to this channel if you're not already subscribed, and like this video please, and do well to share out this video to your loved ones. Thank you. Until I come your way again with another story, for now, from me, it is bye.